Is this assignment still due on the 28th?
No, that's
Okay.
going to be the first thing that I was going to say.
All right.
So yes, it is. It should be recording now. If not, then. So that's the first thing is I'm pushing it back a week. So it'll be due on the 7th of March. Let me write down to make that announcement. Dave, do you have a pen? So this assignment is, are you in my federal or Texas government class, by the way? It's the same for either, but.
I'm in your federal.
Okay. Hey, Carlos. Change date. Lead analysis to, what did I say, March 4th? That's a week later, 28th. Yeah, no, I said it was due on the 28th, right? And now it's going to be due on the 7th of March. Okay, hey Carlos, I'm recording this session because a lot of people had questions about the legislative analysis, so I figured I would just record it and post it so I don't have to kind of regurgitate everything I'm saying, if that's cool. She doesn't know that she's not muted.
How long did that take you to pull it out of your
Dude, how do I pronounce? I feel like I've tried to do this before. Ali Zaha?
Oh gosh. Oh man.
What?
Oh gosh, it took me off. Oh gosh. Alizea.
Alizea, that's right. We've talked about this before. Guys, can I see your faces? I really don't like talking to a black screen.
I only have one eyebrow on.
Okay, no problem. When the next eyebrow comes on, if you would not. I assume that you guys also have questions about the legislative analysis. Any kind of response by y'all would be fine. Okay, well, that's what we're talking about right now. So if you have a different question, bear with me and we will get to you shortly. What I'd like to bring to your attention here, first, we've changed the date. We've postponed the due date by 1 week so that it's now going to be due on March 7th. Essentially, you are picking a piece of legislation that it could have passed by now and become a law, or it could still, I mean, it could have crashed and burned. It really doesn't matter where it is, as long as you fulfill the things that I'm about to explain to you. So I've had students pick things that are, legislation that's just not going to go, it's just not going to move. It's not going to do anything. It will not become a law. And they've analyzed that, and that's perfectly fine. And then I've had students take a piece of legislation that has already become a law and analyze that. It's totally fine either way. It is from either this Texas or federal congressional session. So that means you can choose from either the Texas legislative session, the 86th or 7th, or the 17th or 18th congressional session. So that means Congress, the federal level, this year or last year, and Texas government or Texas legislature at the state level this congressional session or last congressional session. The difference is Congress meets yearly at the federal level and biannually every 2 years at the state level. So if you're looking at last congressional session at the state level, it's going to be farther back than last than the federal government. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All I need is a confirmation in some way from everybody, like just a, or otherwise I don't know if you guys are understanding what I'm saying. Looking at you, Carlos. Are we together? We good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what you're analyzing is a number of things. First is going to be really easy. Who proposed the bill? Where it is in Congress? Why it didn't pass? Let me see if I can pull up a submission. But what does it do? I think I even have, yeah. Yes, I do. This is what it should basically look like, okay? It should have the full name of the bill. Then it'll have a number. It'll say HB or SB, and then whatever number it is. It depends on which session. You'll then want to put the sponsor in the committee. Let me show you where you'll find that. Let's do, Alize, are you in my federal class?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. So we're going to use congress.gov, and that is the United States Congress website. The other ones, if you want to choose a bill from Texas, you would use any one of these other ones, GovTrack Congress Texas, capital.texas.gov. All of those are state level, and these are all state level resources. I will provide you other resources for the federal level. In the meantime, let's open that up. I'll just type it in. I don't know what's happening here. Can you guys see my screen still? Or is it just on?
It's just on the Word document.
Let me figure out how to do that. Share. Oh, I can just do it with my screen. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this is congress.gov, real open and shut. There's a couple of ways you can manipulate this. You can, if you have a particular topic that you would like to see legislation on, you can put in this little area here, just a keyword, like, I don't know, Bob, I know one here. Gun. Bob wants me to look up HB 127. But when I put in just the word gun, you'll see the 117th Congress, that's this congressional session, and the first bulk of information that you need, right? Here's the name of the legislation, Gun Violence Reduction Resource Act of 2021. Here's who sponsored it, Sheila Jackson. Why am I not surprised? You guys don't know who she is. That's a total inside joke then. Where is it? It's in the House Judiciary Committee. And what's the last thing that's happened? It's been referred to the House Judiciary Committee. So realistically, if you look at how a bill becomes a law, which you should have in this week's lecture, then you will see the steps that it takes for a bill to go through. And it's actually like, 13 easy steps for a bill to become a law at the federal level. And if you're in Texas, it's similar, except with appropriations bills. An appropriation bill is a bill that gives money to a specific entity and helps create the federal or state budget. That's different. So would you guys like me to go over that process really quickly?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. I would love to. I don't want to sound silly, but the Schoolhouse Rock really does a very good job of explaining how a bill becomes law. There's also another one that's really good, Crash Course in Government and Politics. I can't remember his name, but he does a really good job as well. So if you forget what I'm about to say, go just YouTube those things. It's very helpful. Let me pull up the PowerPoint so that you can see it as I'm doing it. If we were in class, I'd write it on the board and it would be fun. I miss class. The legislative branch should say updated. Legislature and policy. really should clean up my folders. All right. Is this the PowerPoint that is posted on your Blackboard? I haven't looked. Yes, no, or I haven't looked. Okay, cool. I'm just going to assume that you haven't looked.
I haven't looked.
Thank you, Carlos.
My apologies.
No worries. It's only Tuesday, I think, right?
Okay, I haven't looked either.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't looked.
Now everybody wants to be honest. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, so then I'll go into it. We have Congress as the largest branch of our government, right? If you look at our Constitution, which you at least should have done at some point during this semester, you haven't yet, have you? None of y'all. You haven't even looked.
The Constitution?
Yeah, have you read it? And I'm not asking, I mean, you maybe not read it word for word, but seen it.
Yes.
What's that? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yes, I've looked
A
at it.
little side story for you guys is I was driving by the JCC and I saw that they had a speaker, Ed Sheehan, who was a producer for Funny or Die. Have you guys heard of that comedy series, Funny or Die? You probably have. It's just they make little parody skits. It's very funny. It's very adult humor as well. Anyway, and I was like, oh, that's interesting because he was talking about his book that he wrote. And the book is OMG, WTF Does the Constitution Actually Say? A non-boring guide to how our democracy is supposed to work. And I was like, that sounds super fun. So I went through all of this and then I looked at the book and this is like the dumbest book I've ever read. It's 209 pages about a document that's 4 pages long. So and it's not well written either. It's literally like the first part. It makes me sad. It made me bummed out because I could have done that. I could have written this book. It's 101 basic stuff and made like a bunch of money and gone on speaking series too, but I didn't. Some other guy did. Bummer. In any event, I'm going to use it because it happened to be sitting right here. Although I tried to return it to Amazon because I was mad. So if you look at our Constitution, it's 4 pages long. It is not a long document. And it starts with the preamble, right? Do you guys know the preamble? We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and I'm just jump in here anytime. Ensure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Wow, it's a rough crowd today. When you guys don't laugh at my jokes, it makes me feel super insecure. And I also don't see Alizea or Michael, so I can't even tell if you're smiling. Great. So the preamble states the intention of the document that is forthcoming. It does the following. Let me read the best parts. It establishes the 3 branches of government. It talks about what the purpose of the Constitution is to establish, you know, a new form of government that is by the people, for the people. And then it goes on to the first article, and it's the biggest article, and it's also put first intentionally. They put it first because it's the most important and also the most susceptible to incursions of power. That is, it's the largest branch. It is arguably the most likely to see corruption. So there's a lot of detailed information about what they can and cannot do, specifically to prevent Congress from getting too big or doing something that they didn't intend it to do. And of those things, they put the following. Some of the things that they're allowed to do, which we know are listed not only in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 17 and 18, but outside of that, Article 1 says that they have the responsibility to tax and appropriate federal funds. They are the only branch that can declare war. They regulate commerce that is interstate between states. This can be by way of making a federal minimum wage, different kinds of legislation that would create a safer workplace, ensure against monopolies, make trade agreements and things like that. They check the executive branch by requiring treaties and appointments to be sent through the Senate and approved by the Senate. They also, as we have most recently seen, act as the trial and jury for an impeachment. The House impeaches and then the Senate acts as the actual trial to conduct a verdict. They authorize the establishment of new courts, and that's actually significant because that is also something that the judicial branch can do. But there's a little bit of a difference between that. The authorization of new courts at the congressional level gives them the ability to set wages for the courts and set jurisdictions, which means what kind of court they create, and also how much are we going to pay this? What's the word for the judge? I didn't sleep much last night. In any event, that's not something that the judicial branch can do. So there's a shared power there, but it's not quite the same. And authorization of courts is also where you'll see judicial review, something that Congress gave to the judicial branch to do through Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison established the precedent of judicial review, which is about 95% of what Congress does now. I'm sorry, not Congress, the Supreme Court does now. The holding of Marbury versus Madison is not that the Supreme Court has judicial review. It is something completely different. In making that decision, it established judicial review. So that's something that you should be aware of. The holding was actually something about whether or not the appointed courts and judges of those courts could be lawfully certified and constitutionally required to deliver their contracts. So they don't teach you that. It's not as, it's kind of confusing. So just so you know, they also are required to conduct oversight of the other two branches and the states. So if they see an abuse of power, this would be something like the Benghazi hearings, or there's been a lot of congressional oversight, the Ukraine issue, the Russia issue. Any other one you guys can think of lately? The Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, all of government's just a shit show right now. In any event, that is something that they are required to do. Let me move forward pretty quickly. I want to look at the differences between the House and the Senate so you'll know for your paper. The House is it's a larger branch. We have a bicameral legislature. The House is larger. It's also supposed to be the more reflective of the people. They are every 2 years reelected. So they are actually more, I'm trying to think, they're more homogenous in terms of their representation, which means that they usually are not as, or they're more attuned to, what's the word for specialized? They specialize in different areas of their constituency because they have a much smaller area of representation. They don't have to or they can be more specialized in what is specifically going on with their constituency. So if they're from the 23rd Texas district, they are probably more familiar with things that are agrarian or concerned with oil, and land management in some way, because that district is huge. And the activity in that area is more rural. Whereas if you're representing a district like the 21st, it's significantly more urban. And so you might have more interest or specialization in infrastructure or something like that. The Senate, on the other hand, was supposed to be the more stable of the two bodies. That was a part of the compromise that they created when they were drawing up the Constitution, is that we would have a House and a Senate, and the House would act more as a reflection of the people, and the Senate would act more as a reflection of stability. And I don't know, they'd just be the old white men, you know. This is not like the House of Lords and the House of Commons in Parliament, by the way. Somebody once said that. It's not that way. They sit for 6 years, staggered terms, which means you have 2 senators from each state, 50 states, 100 senators. And you'll see that they go up for a re-election, only 1 senator at a time. So we just re-elected John Cornyn. Ted Cruz is going to be up for re-election. I don't think it's in 2022 for the midterms, but it might be. If that's the case, might suck to be him right now. But I can't say off the top of my head. In any event, they have to represent the whole state. So they can't be specialized, especially in a state like Texas, because it's huge. We have tons of different area. And so they have to be more generalists in terms of their representation. Just like I said, here's some good things. I don't want to go too much into this because I say it on the recording. But I do want to, she's the majority leader now. Heyo. I don't think I updated that. That's my grandma. My grandmother was a politician, and she is speaking there with Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House, 47th Speaker of the House from 1977 to 1987. As a Democrat, my word, I think she would study with him. You know, she's definitely giving him like her number or something. What are they exchanging? What's in her hand?
That's pretty cool, man.
Is that Michael?
Oh, John.
John. I can't see all my participants. Oh, I have a lot more people. Oh my goodness gracious. I'm so sorry about that, guys. I didn't say hi to Kelsey or Giselle. I didn't know you guys were here. Oh, well, I'm basically going through a couple of interesting points. Anyway, yeah, she, that's my grandma. She now has significant dementia, which is just, it's rough. She says some pretty crazy things. Anyway, yeah, that's why I'm in politics, because she was a politician and she used to take me around to like meet all of her politician friends. Not gonna do that, not gonna do that. Let's get to it. So how does a bill become a law? That's easy. Look, totally easy, right? Wham, bam. You want me to explain them each? That this is not easy.
It looks easy.
It's not. It's super complicated. This is a better way to look at it. If you are a visual learner, but really what I would like to do is just kind of tell it to you like a story, if that's okay, because it can be very confusing. So if you are talking about a piece of legislation that is not related to the budget or appropriations in any way, that is creating a budget for the state or the federal government, then it can be introduced in either the House or the Senate. It doesn't matter. If it is a matter of the federal budget, it has to start in the House. So for the ease of this whole thing, we're going to don't do any bill that's going to have to do with the federal budget, because it's much more complicated than that. You have you have continuing resolutions, You have joint and conference committees. It's insane. So let's pretend that there is a law that's being put forth that puts some sort of limit or regulation on the number of fire or number of, Bob, what's that one bill that you hate do?
What?
HB whatever?
A lot.
Okay, well, give me one for an example.
Making it where you need to have a tax stamp for.
So it would create a tax stamp for each box of ammo that you buy, essentially rendering your firearm pretty useless unless you're willing to pay the tax. That sounds a lot like the Stamp Act. You guys remember from the founding? Cool. Nobody's talking. I hate that. Anyway, so let's say that somebody comes up with an idea. And the idea is, I really don't like that people are able to hoard so much ammo. And so let's put some sort of Stamp Act or some tax on boxes of ammo, that you have to have a certain tax stamp in order to have a box of ammo. And so that person, who could be anybody, by the way, it could be me, it could be a lobbying agency, it could be the NRA. So for the purposes of this, let's just say the NRA were the people who said that. They wouldn't, but they could. And they go up to their congressman at the House, their House representative. And they say, hey man, I'm thinking you should do this piece of legislation. Why don't you write up a bill that says you have to pay a tax for each box of ammo you buy? And the representative, Sheila Jackson, says, that's a good idea. I'll do it. And so she goes to her interns and says, write up a bill that puts a tax on each box of ammo. And they do. And so she takes that bill and she gives it to the Speaker of the House. And the Speaker of the House looks at it and says, yeah, okay, we'll do that, because the Speaker of the House is also a Democrat and they're really interested in gun regulations. And so the Speaker will then assign that piece of legislation to a committee. And that committee is going to be the one who's responsible for drafting it, actually making it look like a beautiful piece of legislation. Now, that's the first place that a bill can die. And when I say bill dies, it means that it's over. It doesn't do anything else. Game over. Hold on, let me make it a little more dramatic. Game over. Great. Can somebody please laugh when I make jokes? So if the Speaker of the House happened to be a Republican and doesn't favor any kind of gun regulation, they might look at that bill and say, that's horse pucky. And they'll take it and say, yeah, for sure, I'll definitely assign this to a committee, and then throw it in the trash. So that's the first place it could die. Once it's in committee, then it will be drafted, it'll mark up, they'll make it look like a good piece of legislation. And at that point, it will, they'll vote on it, the whole committee. And these committees are always bipartisan, which means that there's an equal number of people from both parties in the committee. The committee chair will decide on whether or not it is an open bill or a closed bill. And that means that if it is an open bill, then they will be able to, if it passes committee onto the floor, they can make amendments and they can debate on it. And they will also take, make a number of time, how long they'll be able to debate it. If it's closed, they will not be able to make any amendments, but they can still debate. So in committee, they draft it, it's a beautiful piece of legislation, and they decide to vote on it. Let's, for the sake of making it easy, call it a closed bill. No, we're gonna say it's open. It's an open bill. It means they can amend it. So it's an open bill. They vote on it, and if it dies in committee, if it doesn't vote favorably, then the bill will die in committee, which is about 90% of the pieces of legislation that are actually written die in committee. So for whatever reason, it passes committee. Let's pretend. And it then goes to the House floor. And because it's an open bill, they can debate on it for as long as they feel like they need to, or they can make amendments or markup on the floor. If that happens, then there has to be another vote. This is where you will see something like, I don't know what it's called, a filibuster. Oh, that's a filibuster, where they're debating and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking until the time expires and the bill dies. In this case, for whatever reason, they're not going to filibuster it, but they have been talking for a really, really long time about this piece of legislation. And the majority of people have decided, the majority of members of the House have decided that they really don't want to talk about it anymore. They just want to vote. So they are going to invoke something called cloture, C-L-O-T-U-R-E, cloture. And that is saying basically they're voting to move into voting procedure on the piece of legislation. So they've amended it, they've talked about it, and now they're tired of talking, they just want to vote. So they'll vote to move to cloture. Cloture. Isn't that a weird word? Cloture? Like a blood clot? I don't like it. But I wasn't there when they wrote it. So I'm looking for my water bottle. That's talking a lot makes me thirsty. Did I come in with it, Bob? Helpful, thank you. Layla, come inside. Sorry, had to go outside for a new water. It's a sparkling water, not a beer, but I was tempted. Okay, so where were we? So they've decided to vote on cloture. And if that vote comes out favorably, they will then vote on the piece of legislation as it exists after they've amended it on the House floor. Again, another place where it can die. So what's that, three places it can die?
Yes.
Okay. So it is past the House. The House votes on it and they decide that they like that bill and they want to proceed with it. So then once it passes the House, it goes to the Senate and basically does the same thing. There's a couple of differences and things that happen or could happen that usually do happen is that you'll see that once it goes to the Senate, the president of the Senate or the majority leader of the Senate, right now it's Chuck Schumer, right? It used to be Mitch McConnell. I'm pretty sure it's Chuck Schumer unless they voted for somebody else, but I don't think they did. Sometimes I deliberately don't watch the news because it makes me crazy. You guys understand that, right? So it goes to the Senate and the Senate right now, today, is also Democratic, which means that they probably also want that bill to come to fruition, right? What if this was 6 months ago? Was the Senate Democratic at that time? Who
I
had
don't know, man.
they weren't, right? So what do you think would happen if this bill were introduced 6 months ago?
It would probably like
It would die.
been thrown in the trash. Yeah.
Yeah, so the president of the Senate or the Senate majority leader, depending, 6 months ago was Mitch McConnell. He would for sure put that on the calendar for like years later. He would say, yeah, no, totally. I'm totally gonna send this to committee. I've got a lot to do today, so I might not get to it today, maybe tomorrow. Probably not though. You know what I'm saying? In fact, Mitch McConnell put off the impeachment trial of Trump until after Trump was out of office, specifically because of that reason, because he had the power to, wouldn't be able to remove a president who's already left office, if that makes any sense. They did, that was intentional. So right now this bill goes to the Senate, and the Senate has a slim majority, which means they have 51%. That's all they really need to get a lot done. And the person who is in charge of breaking ties in the Senate, because again, there's 100 senators, is the vice president. And the vice president is also I saw your mouth move, Carlos. Yeah, she's a Democrat. Which means that she'll probably vote in favor of the bill as well. So this goes to Chuck Schumer, and Chuck Schumer looks at it, he says, this is wonderful. This piece of legislation is exactly what we need for some real high quality gun reform. Okay, so I'm gonna send it to a committee, and then I'm gonna have lunch, and it's gonna be soup. Please laugh. I beg you. My husband upstairs is laughing at me. This happens in class all the time.
I believe it.
So anyway, Chuck Schumer puts it, he sends it to committee, and the committee will then do the same thing, that they'll look at it. This is where it starts to get tricky. They can do a number of things. They can take the piece of legislation as it exists and vote on it, make no changes, vote on it at the committee level, and then pass it on to the Senate floor. That never happens, ever. They, for whatever reason, if they make any change in committee, even add a comma, add a little clause that says, unless you're law enforcement, anything. I'm talking about any change, any change. Like fix a spelling error, that's a change. Then it has to start all over again. Because it has to pass the House and the Senate in the same exact form. So they go to, there is a way to get around that, okay? So it goes to the Senate committee, and then it goes to, they've decided to add a clause in there that says not law enforcement agencies, they don't have to pay the tax, some exemption, whatever. So they will then say, Chuck Schumer will go over to Nancy Pelosi's desk and say, Nancy, we need to call a conference committee. Conference committees exist wholly to rectify differences between pieces of legislation in the House and the Senate to facilitate them being passed. That's an important thing I just said. It will be on the quiz. A conference committee can be called, and a conference committee pulls members from both the House and the Senate together so they can rectify any differences to facilitate the passage of legislation. So they add a clause that says except law enforcement. Chuck Schumer goes to Nancy and says we need to call a conference committee. The conference committee convenes and they work through the whole thing and decide to go ahead and enact that or add that piece, that little caveat. And so they will say, okay, this looks good. And then it will go back to the House that called the conference committee. Or I'm sorry, the chamber that called the conference committee. So if this started in the Senate and the conference, and then the change was made in the House would call the conference committee. But in this case, it started in the House and the Senate called the conference committee. So it'll go back to the Senate. Does that make sense? Okay, Carlos is nodding.
Yes, ma'am.
So they've sent it back to the committee that started the change. Let's call it the Judiciary Committee. Judiciary Committee made the change, called the conference committee. The conference committee added the change, went back to the Senate's Judiciary Committee for them to vote on it. it votes favorably, but it doesn't have to. It could die it could die at the beginning, it could die in the conference committee, it could die in the judiciary committee. Then it'll do the same thing. They'll go, if it passes the judiciary committee, it'll go to the Senate floor and they will filibuster and it could die, or they can invoke cloture and it could die, or they can make amendments. And if they made another change to it, guess what has to happen? It has to go for another conference committee to see if they want to address the change. I'm telling you, this happens all the time. Just watch the news. I'm sure you have heard them say these words before, but now that I'm explaining it to you, you'll understand what's happening. So if they make a change at the floor of the Senate, it then goes to another conference committee. And they do the same thing. Then it'll go back to the floor. And for whatever reason, the committee decides to finally vote in favor, and then the Senate floor votes in favor. Now, because we have made a change, it has to start over at the House. But we called a conference committee. So the House already knows what it looks like and has already hopefully spoken to each other, and they can easily send it through committee, send it to the House floor to vote and debate, and get it through that way. Because at this point, they've spoken to each other. It doesn't always happen that way, but it could. At this point, we've gone through all the scenarios. If we were to actually have this piece of legislation, it would have certainly died a long time ago, or something would have come up to make something not happen. That's why all of those steps, it's done that way intentionally, because they don't want Congress to be able to pass a bunch of legislation. It is intentionally a complicated process. So once it passes the House, then it passes the Senate, and all of that stuff that we talked about could, or maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But at the end of the day, both houses have passed the legislation in the exact same form. Then it goes to the president, and the president can do a number of things. I'm not going to say, I want you all to participate. What could the president do?
You can veto it.
Bob, my husband answered. It's like he's participating in class too. You never listen to me when I talk about government. I'm so happy. Who said veto it? I think it was John.
John, yes.
Yes, John. They can veto. The president can veto the legislation. What else can they do?
The cafeteria.
I'm hungry. What else can the president do besides veto it?
You said there was only one person in there.
Who is it? Who's in there?
But I don't want to leave. Now we got to let them know when we're leaving on the radio.
Who's talking? On the radio. Carlos is talking. Okay, so you guys are driving me crazy. If the president doesn't veto it, the president could also, Bob?
Burn it.
Burn it?
No. Okay.
You could do that too.
I mean, he could do that, but
You could approve it.
the president could sign it and it becomes a law. And then we all have to deal with it. My husband will complain. He can sit on it and ignore it. They can sign it or veto the bill. I just got that, Giselle. Thank you. Sit on it and ignore it. I'm so glad you said that, Kelsey, because if that happens, two things could happen. First, if the president gets it and within 10 days, Congress adjourns, sine die, S-I-N-E-D-I-E. Or maybe it's sine, I can't, it's Latin. Sine? Well, in Latin, they pronounce every letter. So yeah, it's sine die. That means that they are not going to reconvene in that congressional session. That would make it a pocket veto. I think that's kind of what was it Kelsey was going for? What you're going for, Kelsey? The only way it can be a pocket veto is if Congress, within 10 days of the president receiving it, adjourns, here, let me write it in the chat so everyone knows how. Adjourns, sine die. I also spelled adjourns incorrectly. But the important thing is sine die. There is no future meeting date for that congressional session. If that congressional session is over, then it is a pocket veto. That is the only circumstance that it is a pocket veto. Let's say that Congress adjourns for the weekend or for summer break or for Christmas break. They go home for Christmas break and they plan to meet up again in a couple weeks or whatever. There is a planned next meeting session in that Congress. And the president decides to just sit on it for 10 days. What happens after 10 days? If there is a next meeting
It's
session,
vetoed.
it's not a veto. It actually just becomes a law without the president's signature. And that applies both at the state level and the federal level. Bet you guys didn't know that one. So in that case, if Congress doesn't adjourn sine die, they adjourn for the weekend or they don't adjourn at all. Maybe it's like a Monday, I don't know. Then within 10 days of the president receiving it, it becomes a bill or a law without the president's signature. Now, what can Congress do if the president decides to veto? Not pocket veto, just veto. It happened recently. You guys know it. See,
Can't they vote on it again, like Senate?
they can override the veto. Yes, they can vote 2/3 of both houses would override the veto and make it again a bill or a law without the president's signature. Override the veto. But do you guys see why it has to be a sine die adjournment? Because if there is no date for them to convene again, there's no way for them to override the veto. And in that way, it's a pocket veto. Does that make sense? Kind of, a little bit. Great. Nobody said anything, but I'm just going to assume that you do because of that. Excuse me. Okay, so we've gone through all of that. We've gone through all of that. Do you guys have questions about that process? I need you all to collectively, like, okay, I'm going to go through.
Wait, what did you say again, ma'am?
I said, who has questions about how a bill becomes a law?
No, I don't.
Okay, John says no. Alizea, do you have questions?
No, ma'am.
Giselle?
No questions, thank you.
Michael?
No, ma'am.
And Kelsey. Kelsey. Oh, maybe she put it in the chat. Okay, great. So let's move on then back to the legislative analysis. Is that what everyone's been waiting for, right? So now we're asking, where is it? Okay. If we go back to this tells you what the latest thing that has happened in the scheme of things that happen when a bill becomes a law. And Congress.gov is it's much more user-friendly. It's a little intimidating, but if you're gonna do the federal government, Congress.gov is a really good resource. It'll tell you, what they're talking about today, what's the top 10 most Googled bills things like that. So we see that this is the title, okay? This is the sponsor, this is the committee, okay? And so far it's just been introduced. And this would be where you would put the name HB or SB right here. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm just gonna assume your silence means nothing, but just so y'all know, I can't see unless I go and look at the chat. So if somebody is putting something in the chat and I'm not addressing it, can somebody who has the ability to use, like, you know, tell me, go look at the chat. Okay, so we've looked at, and for you guys who joined us late, I literally went to congress.gov and typed in a keyword, just something I'm interested, gun, and it came up with the top results for the keyword gun. And we're looking at the 116th or 117th congressional session. And so this would apply. This looks interesting. I want to read more about it. So I click it. And it'll tell me the same things, right? You can look here and it'll tell you there is one summary for HR 121. These are so good. If you can find one that has a summary, these people here, the Congressional Research Committee works for Congress to make basically any bill. It does what we're doing. It does an analysis and it does it in layman's terms. So it's super, super user friendly. If like, you should do it. This one has one. That's awesome. So what does the bill do? It authorizes the Department of Justice to hire 200 people. That's interesting. For the to be investigators and agents in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. That's interesting. So I go to, why did it do that? There was one summary. Let me go through here. You can look at the actual text of the legislation. Here it is. So beautiful. If you can read this and make sense of it, you're smart. Try it. This one's fairly simple. I mean, it seems to say that, let's see, this would be the background of it. So why are they making a bill that adds 200 people because of these reasons? And then the point of the bill is to hire 200 people to serve. Okay, so let's go back to the analysis. You would put the summary of the bill. This bill exists to help the help supply resources to the firearms. Was it tobacco, firearms? You know, that one. Because of all of these reasons. And then, I mean, if you go through, you'll just literally be able to put in, you know, the background would be this part right here because of this, whatever. Fiscal impact. So this, in theory, there are bills that don't have a fiscal impact. That means that it's not going to cost anybody any money. If you think that the bill that you're doing might not have a fiscal impact, please let me know, because it's pretty rare, but it does happen. In fact, I can try and help you find it. Let's see here. 2 actions have gone through. Here we go. More on this bill. Whoa, what happened? CBO is a cost estimate. I don't think they've done one on this one, but we can check. It has not been received, so they haven't done one yet. But what's it going to cost to hire 200, you know, employees? Constitutional authority. This is interesting because it says this is a constitutional bill because it is pursuant to the powers granted in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 8, which are the expressed powers, Clause 1 and 3 and 18. So they aren't using the necessary, they are using the necessary and proper clause. So let's look that up. I think that's interesting, guys. See, this is our Constitution in action. Okay. I know what clause 18 is, but let me go back to just. Was it one? Clause 1, to lay, collect taxes, duties, imports, to pay debts for common. So that makes sense. What was it? 3 as well? To regulate commerce with foreign nations.
I thought it was 6 or
6?
6, 18 or 8.
1, 8, and 18. I don't remember.
Nah, I think I just confused you.
Yeah. In any event, I know that they, let me, what is 8? It was 1, I thought it was 3, and I can also see that it might apply to 3, but they did also say 18. And I know 18 is to make laws that are necessary and proper, the necessary and proper clause. We learned that when we did federalism, right? So you're going to be doing a lot of clicking. Oh, 1, 3, and 18. Yeah, that's what I thought. There's a lot of clicking around, but there is information for all of these things. And there's also, you can get information, bill history. Did I just look at that? You can get information from other places. The Texas Tribune tends to have a lot of information about pieces of legislation and summaries and such. This one doesn't have too terribly much. It's very cut and dry to enforce gun laws. So it doesn't have to be a long paper. You're basically just telling me, finding a bill, why does it exist? What's the background of that? What's it going to cost in terms of our federal budget? Where's the money going to come from, so to speak? And in this case, it is going to cost some money because they're federal agents, but they have not gotten that far yet. What I would do in that case is, say that they haven't gotten that far yet, but, here is the general salary for agents and multiplying that by 200, something like that would be totally fine. It's in the Judiciary Committee. It probably will. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with this bill, to be honest. I'm going to put a tracker on it. I'm interested to see. I'll sign in later. So what other questions do you guys have for me? Do you want me to try and do, it's a very similar process for the Texas legislature in terms of using those links to do the same basic thing,
All right.
Does that help you guys understand what we're doing here?
It helps me a little bit. I was just confused on where to get the information, but you showed me right here.
So you could do that. I mean, at this point, you could also look at, this is literally when I was a student way back in the day, we did something similar. And you can just say, like, look, these are the top 10 most viewed bills are, don't choose an HR because that's a resolution and it's not the same. Today, Presidential Transition Enhancement Act. That's interesting. I guess you could do an HR if you want to. House resolution or Senate resolution. These are going to be the most Googled, so to speak, or most looked at. So maybe I'll use those. Or maybe I'll type in what I'm interested in. Look around, slow down and read some of these things because it'll show you like what they did in Congress yesterday, what's on the schedule to be done tomorrow. Search the reports. So maybe I'll look for something that happened or something that's more invasive about guns and search for a congressional report. Bob, what's that bill that you're really mad about?
What?
HR or HB? HB 127 House. HB 127 is something that my husband's been watching. It is a bill that talks about gun violence. One 127, are you sure? Do you know the name of it? We've talked about it before.
What?
What's the name of it?
I thought of that.
I'll do it. It's fine. Do you guys see? I just put it in Google, you know? So this one, actually, that one was on the top 10, wasn't it? It was like number 1. This is the one that's getting Bob all worked up. He loves guns. A summary is in progress. So let's see. The bill, it's been introduced. The text of the bill is called "To provide for licensing of firearms and ammunition possession and the registration of firearms and to prohibit the possession of certain ammunition." What's the other one, Bob?
What?
HB 127 and something else is similar. So he would probably want to do something like that. You can look up, let's see. The president has been talking about student loan forgiveness. You can talk, he also asked Congress to look into immigration, you know? So just type in immigration and see what comes up, you know? And then click on stuff. You'd be surprised once you kind of slow down and read the stuff, how much you actually do understand. It's intimidating, but it's really not, I'm not looking for you guys to be proficient in, you know, all of this dialect. The federal government is going to ask you to register all your firearms. Ooh, military style weapons license. That's interesting. Psychological evaluations? Oh my God. The Attorney General will deny you a license. Oh, this is exciting to read. All right, so who has questions about the legislative analysis? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
Well, I have a question because if there's a companion, because for example, one of mine is like it's a more updated one, a more recent one. Do I use the most recent one? I'm on the Texas legislator one.
Okay, let's see. What is it? Is it legisledge.tech?
It's SB 32. It's about the student loan repayment assistance program.
Capital Texas. See, it's so, I actually find Texas to be more confusing. Capital.texas.gov. I like Legiscan. I find it easier, so I'm gonna look at that one. This is a nonpartisan governmental group that looks at bills for you. So this is not a state agency, so to speak. They're independent. So this is the one by Judith Zaffarini. She's from New Braunfels, isn't she? This is the one you're looking at, the establishment and operation of the Texas Beyond Time Student Loan Program.
Yes, I think.
It's similar. It'll give you info.
It says like under the companions, it's like it gives you a similar identical. Well, it says identical.
Are you on the actual government website? This legislature. Oh, I've stopped sharing my screen. Let me share it now. This one.
Yeah. But isn't that one our education? No, mine says at the end for like during the coronavirus pandemic. This was in 2020. That's what I'm saying.
Let me see. Can you, so
Oh, it's in the 87th.
87th congressional?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I should mention that.
SB 32, filed Senate bills. So like for you, I popped this screen up, right? And I'm immediately overwhelmed with which one do I click on?
Yeah, that's why I kind of said it's reading.
Like that's why I like the capital one, but just
Yeah, no, I'll probably use the other one. It looked.
You don't have to do that, but like just stop and take a look at what you're looking at and decide, you know, just kind of stop, slow down and read and understand that you're not going to automatically understand everything right away. You have to read it through, but also be confident in yourself because you know, I feel like you're kind of you're overthinking yourself. That was meant to be like, you know, you actually do know, but feature downloads. Oh, my foot's asleep. So I have not looked at your piece of legislation. 32, you said? SB
Yeah.
32? So I didn't really find anything when I went to the Senate website right off the bat, but I do know that I could go here and look at the filed Senate bills. And so you
Yeah, that's where I went.
87?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to go to, I'm looking around just kind of like what happened today. Oh, look, legislature. I'm going to go to the 87th legislature. And then I see filed Senate bills in the 87th and 32 by Judith Zaffirini right here.
Yeah.
And there is, you know, all the stuff. The companion would be HB 20 or 1205. And the companion is because it's because there is a similar one that is being presented in the House, and they are at some point probably going to combine them in a committee at some. That's basically what that means. Their documents, companion documents, are designed at the time of introduction, only for aid. So you can look at it and see. In fact, if I were you, open a new tab. I'm interested in the companion. You can put in the view. How do I get this out of my way? You can put here the bill that you're looking at, and then maybe in parentheses use the companion. Just put the companion information also. Go through that. Click around, guys. So if you get to texts and you have one of these, this is the bill in its, the way, you know, it's written, which is, you can probably understand it, the gist of it, but it's not necessarily as easy to understand. And it's also real like ugly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I might switch to the other one.
If you can find one, and the reason that it's that way is because it's the 87th and that literally just started. I mean, just so I can't imagine they would do stuff. Texas meets every 2 years on years that are uneven. So they met in 2019, they'll meet, or they're meeting now, and they meet for like 3 months. And that's because Texas is a part-time legislature. And I think I have that in your module this week if you're in my Texas government class, but there wouldn't be a lot of information for this yet because, you know, and look, maybe perhaps you're needing a little help. You can just go to click on one of these. What's the legislative process again? Read through that. It'll tell you. You can remember. You can do it. Does that help you at all? Was that helpful?
It helped me switch to the other one.
Honestly, I think you should, because that one definitely doesn't have a lot of information that you would find helpful.
So it was just what was the other one?
HB 120.
No, I'm talking about the website.
Congress.gov.
Congress.gov, okay.
Far easier to remember. This one, I mean, I use this constantly. I can never remember if it's texas.capitol.gov or capital.texas. Like it's the whole thing. It's much more difficult, not as user-friendly. But it still has, let me see if, I don't know that, let's use, nothing? Did I spell marijuana wrong? M-A-R-I-J-U-A-N-A? Is that, somebody tell me if that's right or not. Don't act like you guys don't know what I'm talking about. Marijuana, what?
What is that, ma'am?
It's weed, devil's lettuce, ganja, grass, kush. What else? Is there another one? Whoa, I learned a new one. Gas? Is that what is that what it is? Are you laughing because that's right or wrong?
That's right. It's right. It's right.
Seems so silly to me. Gas makes you go, but weed slows you down. So like,
You can say loud too. Smells like loud.
It smells like loud.
Yeah.
Are you hearing this, babe?
What?
Loud. It smells like loud. That's kid for weed. You guys have all these new words like simp. What is that? What is this?
A simp?
I'm a pimp.
A pimp?
Simp is like someone that.
Because I'll be honest, I'm on TikTok a lot and I don't understand what they're talking about.
You be simping.
So what does that mean?
It's like he's like always on her, like he's like always with her. He's simping.
It means like to be like in love or like falling in love.
Yeah.
Aw,
Yeah.
not that bad. Anyway, back to this. You guys keep me young. So, like I said, this is not as user-friendly, but you can still use it. I mean, if you look at the legislative activity, you'll see. And I mean, if you don't know, you could always go to like a representative's website and see. Judith Zaffarini, oh God, she's the worst. She has a website and it'll tell you on her website what's her jam. Oh, she's of Rio Grande, Colorado River to Corpus Christi. That's where I see it, Corpus Christi. But look, it talks there, it gives you information about what she does and what. So Senators area reports to the families of SD 21, Southern District 21. So you can go around in that way. You guys can find who represents you and see what they're doing. Bills, the 87th. These are the bills that Judith Zaffarini has put forth in the 87th congressional session. Texas Promise Grant Program for certain students at public institutions of higher education. Interesting. I'm interested in that one. Relating to the establishment of Promise Grant for certain students at two-year public institutions. So anyway, I think that if you guys just kind of start and don't be too intimidated by all of the, government words, you're gonna be totally fine. But I do know, let me go back, that if you have something very specific, like I can't find the fiscal note for this, or I can't find the most recent action, you know? So are you guys good on that? Are we good? You have any other questions for me? Something unrelated? Different question? So if you don't have any questions, I'd like to remind you that this is office hours, so you are welcome to stay and ask a question, but you are also not required to be here. If you have had your question answered, you can just log off. I would prefer if you said bye though.
Sorry, when is this due?
That's a good question, and I pushed the date till March 7th, so by a week.
March 7th? Oh, it says the 28th.
I know, but then there was that
Okay, yeah,
little
no.
ice thing, and I'm gonna put an announcement as soon as we're done here. I'm also gonna
Okay.
upload this. I've been recording. I said that at the very beginning that I'm gonna record this because some students have had questions, and then I will upload it onto Blackboard so that you can refer back to it.
All right, that's good because I had a couple things to do this week too. So
It is, and I will make sure to make that known.
Well, thank you so much, man. Have a good day.
You're welcome, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
all right, bye, Professor.
Bye. Thanks for dropping by.
You're welcome.
Well, it's just me now. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this office hour session and I will upload it. Sign off. Let me know if you have any questions.